everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Frederick Coleman, and I'm happy to be joined here by best-selling author and marketing consultant J. Kelly Hoey. Welcome. We're really excited to have you here with us.
I am thrilled to be here.
Great. I know that we're all ready to get started, but I'm going to first go through some quick housekeeping information for our audience, and then we'll be able to jump right in. Really, the most important thing to tell all of you is that you can ask questions throughout the entire presentation, and we absolutely encourage you to do so. You can ask questions by clicking the comments question button right below the video and get those submitted in. But now to properly introduce our guest. Networking strategist and coach J. Kelly Hoey is the author of Build Your Dream Network, Forging Powerful Relationships in a Hyper-Connected World. Kelly's career has evolved from law to management to entrepreneurship, being invited to lead a global business network for women, co-founding a startup accelerator, appearing on CNBC's Power Pitch, contributing to various publications, including New York Times, Fast Company, and Forbes, and co-creating, along with moderating, the Meet the Innovators speaker series at the Apple Store in Soho are just a few of her career highlights. I'm really excited to get this presentation started, so I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to you.
Thanks, Frederick. And yes, I want to reiterate what Frederick said. Ask your questions. This is an interactive and reflective session. So if you don't already have, a pen, notebook handy, grab one, have it nearby, because there's lots for you to think about and reflect on while we're here. I recognize there's a lot of people who signed up and you're at various stages in your career journey. So know that this material, wherever you are, is an approach, I want to say a formula that I use and think is universally applicable. So you're not too experienced or too inexperienced to take in what we're going to talk about here in terms of how to think about networking, how to use this to create the career you want, reinvent from your current career and move forward. So to get started, here's what I'd like you to answer, and you can answer this notebook, and I encourage you to put it in the comments. When you think of networking, what do you imagine? What's the activity? What's the scenario? What's the need? When you think about networking, what are you imagining? And with that, when you think about professional networking, how do you feel? Interestingly, in one study, when they primed, study participants before asking them about networking, they primed them with words around soap. And when they asked the study participants about professional networking, the word dirty came up a lot. So if professional networking can sometimes feel particularly awkward for you, just know that you're not alone. And this is something that, we're human beings. We are social creatures. So a little bit more about me. Frederick gave a wonderful introduction, a few of my career highlights. I started my career as an attorney. There's part of my background. Undergraduate from the University of Victoria with political science and economics, law degree from UBC in Vancouver, somehow ended up in New York City. And because of networks, relationships, my life took a bunch of unexpected turns, places I didn't imagine my skill set being used in roles and being asked to do things that, I couldn't have foreseen, but my network saw in me. I'm also sort of sharing some of these things, sort of describing kind of who I am, because when we get into the conversation about what is a network versus what is networking, this is important to remember. All of us bring a complexity and range of roles and experiences and interactions. And all of those accumulated touch points creates a network that might be broader, more diverse, full of more possibilities than you're seeing or imagining with the network that you have today. So this is what we're going to accomplish. As we talked about, kind of in the title, or you saw from the title of the program when you signed up for it, let's reimagining what networking is. When I asked you the question, what do you think about networking? You may have a very limited or siloed view of what networking is. And I want you to think more expansively. We're also going to talk about the importance of setting clear networking goals and asks. There's some neuroscience behind that, why you want to do that. And yes, I've got some networking quick fixes. So you're not just like, okay, this was all kind of amorphous, but I need practical and actionable. We'll leave you with that as well. So let's talk networks and networking and why the difference between the two is important. One is a noun, one is a verb, right? Let's distinguish these two things. So when we think about a network, it's a set of relationships. That's, the noun, right? Why are networks important? Like human relationships, as I said, we're human, we're social creatures. We are wired to connect. Harvard has conducted, they have a Center for Adult Development, and it is the largest and longest longitudinal study of all the longitudinal studies that are out there. Started post-World War II. It is a merging of two different studies, so they're not just studying, high-privileged men who went to Harvard. It's expanded over the years. But what they've learned after like 80 years of this study is the single predictor of well-being in life are our human relationships, aka our networks. So relationships matter in and of themselves. Relationships matter for not only how we succeed in our careers, but overall with our well-being, our happiness, mental health, physical health, a whole lot of things. So networks, we're talking about the noun. Networking, we're talking about the verb. Your network is a lot of things. If you're here, you might be like, hey, I'm an alum of a certain institution and I'm trying to change jobs and I've got this going on. You may be in the reinvention of your career. You may be thinking about a very narrow slice of your network. Right now, I'd really like you to stop and think about, okay, let me think about everything going on in my life. Who and what is my network? Are you volunteering? Okay, obviously you're here, you're an alum of an institution, maybe two. Is there, communities that you're part of, local communities, social communities, religious communities? There is a job, but there's also past jobs. If you're someone who lives somewhere like I do, New York City, the building you live in is a community. Maybe you work out of a co-working space. Just take a moment and start jotting down, what are the broader picture you can paint of your network? Because I can pretty much guarantee you've got a lot more resources in there than you may be imagining. We are all very tempted when we get on this topic of networking to imagine that we need to meet someone new. We need to go and talk to strangers because somehow that's what networking is, rather than looking to and leaning on for support, for introductions, for guidance, for opportunity from the people who already know what we are capable of. So give thought to, and like I said, write down, what are the networks, professional organizations, you can see also friends, the online communities, there's Facebook groups of Peloton users. There's all sorts of things around your interests that may reveal networks that you can and should be tapping into. So, who is your network? I encourage you as in this session, as we talk about reimagining, networking, reimagine what is your network. And understanding this about your network. All of us come to this webinar. We come to every interaction with all this bundle of relationships behind us. So your network has networks. And that is important to remember because we overlook that fact. People look and take their network on face value rather than thinking, who else do they know? Who else are they interacting with? Where could a conversation with my immediate friend, where could that lead to? Because of their direct connections and connections of their connections and so forth and so on. So let's flip over to the verb. Networking. Here's what I think of networking. It is every single human interaction. Here's why I think about it this way. I graduated from law school well before the robust nature of the internet. I showed up out of law school in my first job well before we had the ability to log on to an intranet to do our work, well before we had devices like this. I graduated from law school. I entered a profession where I'd immediately recognized there was a fundamental tension between the two pillars for success. One pillar for success was doing the work and becoming an expert in the work, which as a lawyer means hours, billing hours, which means a lot of time behind your desk, facing a screen or a book, doing the work. The other pillar for success as an attorney is building relationships. To build relationships, you have to get out behind your desk. If you imagine networking as only being schmoozing, if you only imagine networking as conferences or client dinners, sporting events, whatever, if you only imagine networking as that narrow slice of activity, there is a ridiculous, almost reconcilable tension between these two things. So I thought to myself, I have to think about this relationship building more broadly, because to be successful, I have to do both of these things well. Too much of one without the other is not going to make me successful in this profession. So I started to think, okay, where are my touch points with my clients? It's how I send out a memo. It's the wording of an email. It's how I answer the phone or how I leave a voicemail. When we have client meetings, it's noting what are the client's preferences? Is there a time of day they like to meet? Is there a day of the week they like to meet? I had one set of clients, there was this particular conference room they liked. What's the food? Are they the person who, the client who comes in and immediately makes a beeline for the morning pastries, or do they avoid them because they want the fruit? Okay, more fruit, less of, the morning pastry. Sounds really little and trivial, but those tiny touch points matter to more of us. Like if you think about yourself, when someone remembers the little things about you, how do you feel? And those smaller gestures can build a stronger relationship with someone than imagining showing up once in some sort of grandiose way, thinking it's going to make up for, years of ignoring them. So this is why I have this notion that networking is every single human interaction. This, right, now opens up opportunities. It's also a little scary, I'll admit, because now you have to think about, oh, how am I showing up? What like, am I showing up for myself and for other people in a really strong way? Am I the type of person other people would want to network with? Like, how are you doing this and when? So let me show you. Let's look together at an example of what do I mean by, every single human interaction and a story that has stuck with me for some time. So many years ago, I was at what you would think was a traditional business networking event here in New York City. It was a power breakfast at the 21 Club. It was a room filled with women executives. This was when I was the global head of a business network for women, and this is why I was invited into this room. They had a panel talking about the sort of big four pillars of the New York economy. And one of the panelists was Glenda Bailey, who was then the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar magazine. And she was asked at some point in this panel discussion, what was her greatest career achievement? And you think, you've been, and Glenda Bailey had been head of European, fashion and London-based, fashion publications. She's had a very illustrious career. And you're thinking, okay, like, what's she going to say? She's going to say she discovered this designer or this supermodel, or she named this trend and predicted this before anybody else. Like, instead, she told this story. When Glenda Bailey, who is British, took the job with Harper's Bazaar, a US publication, this is the first time she'd worked for a non-British, non-European publication. And no sooner had she arrived in New York that she was on a plane across the pond back to London for London Fashion Week. And this picture is a pretty good, depiction of probably London Fashion Week at the time. At that time, straight rows on either side of the catwalk. And what they did was in the first row, or first rows on one side of the runway, you had the British and European publications. And on the other side of the runway, you had American and the rest of the world publications. Not the Kardashians and all of that in the front row. Editors in chief of fashion magazines in the front row. Brits and Europeans on one side, the Americans and everybody else on the other. So for the first time in Glenda Bailey's career, she is sitting on the other side of the runway from her career. And as she told the story, she looked across the runway and she saw a familiar face. So she did what most of us would do as a human being. Oh, look, there's so-and-so. And she waved. And then her career success hit her in the face because the entire front row waved back. And it struck her at that moment that she had mentored every single one of those people. To get where you're going, you need to help other people get where they're going. And one of the things in terms of building relationships is helping other people, showing up and providing guidance and assistance. This is one example where, how do you build a strong network of editors-in-chief in fashion magazines? Okay, well, you could think, oh gosh, I could go out and schmooze, or, you're in the industry and you are there being helpful, answering questions, helping them do their job. You could apply this example to any industry where you are the person who is tending and caring for, being the go-to, being willing to help others. That act is an incredible act of networking generosity and builds an incredible network. So you can build the relationships around your career that you need without the awkward schmooze. And this is why I share this example, and this is why I love this example so much. Let me give you another example, since this was an old, old one back in the day, people showing up, in physical spaces and going to offices and all the rest of it. Another way in terms of thinking about what is networking, how about just being human online? In a world where we are bombarded by content and we are told, here's how you go viral, or here's how you do this, or here's how you get more likes, here's how you monetize your content. Why don't we think about how it can be more human? How can we be more authentic? I think of physical networking spaces no differently than digital, or digital networking spaces no different than physical. And as I shared in my book, Build Your Dream Network, LinkedIn feels like the office or the industry conference for me. I feel like I got to put my suit on again. I feel back my lawyer days. And I want to get on there. I want to share professional information. I want to read professional information that helps other people, kind of get smarter about and helps them in their jobs. I don't want to see what people ate for lunch unless they're a food blogger or a restaurateur. I don't want, I mute all that kind of stuff. Make me smarter about my job, right? So LinkedIn serves a really valuable purpose that way. And I take that mentality when I walk in there. The information I share there relates to, this is a professional, business, career-oriented audience. I'm me, I'm authentically me, but how I share the information may be different than if I flipped over to another platform. So Instagram, I think I kind of figure out now when I think about it like a yard sale. Some people are there just to mill around. Some people are there to chat. Some people are there to buy. It's a whole smorgasbord of stuff. And that's the way I sort of now when I get on Instagram, I'm like, okay, here at the yard sale, what's happening? Who's socializing? Who's selling? Who's just making queries? Who's just walking by? Let's see what's happening. And I kind of, my behavior is more in tune with that and my mindset when I go on Instagram. And as I used to say, Facebook was friends and family. You think about, how you share information. And then Twitter, back in the day, now X, but Twitter, I used to say, was the great cocktail party. I now jokingly refer to it's the bar under new management. But back in the day, Twitter was a great, cocktail party. And if you were the good guest, right? People would invite you into conversations. And well, there's so much of a dark side of some of these platforms. When we use it in a human way, there's the promise of them. The networking promise in terms of who and what they can connect us to is really powerful. And I share this, capture from my own Twitter stream. So Tom Peters, for some who may know, is the best-selling business book author. He had the best-selling business book for 40 years, amongst his other, 19 or 20 books that he published. In Search of Excellence, an incredible business book. And as I like to jokingly say, how would I meet an author like Tom Peters? I could be a sycophant at a book signing, right? Or some creepy stalker at, the end of his driveway in Massachusetts or something, right? Instead, dialogues over management issues on Twitter led to Tom I followed Tom then followed me. That led to dialogue. That led to Tom discovering that, I'd written a book. Tom is very supportive of women authors, particularly women nonfiction, business book authors. I teased him when he, said, by the way, he bought my book. I direct messaged him and said, we do have the same publisher. They might have sent you a copy for free. And as a result of this, Tom has become a friend and a mentor. And then before social media, when would that have happened? So there's an element with these digital platforms that if we use them in a human way, the first words out of your mouth, if you met someone in person, they wouldn't necessarily be, here's my LinkedIn profile, let's connect. Kind of would be weird. So why would we do that on a webinar? Why do people toss that in their Zoom as their first, on the chat, or, any other, platform where we're doing a video? Why do we put that in as that's the first way we introduce ourselves to people, as opposed to, let me get to know you a little bit. Let's have a little bit of dialogue before saying something like, I'd like to continue this conversation. How about if we continue it over on LinkedIn? When the other person says, sure, then provide the link. Well, why don't we use these in human ways? Because they do hold the promise of being the starting point for a really human relationship. So there's that. And hopefully there's going to be some questions on it, because I always love this. So as I said, once I said we're going to talk about networks and networking and why the differences are important, and hopefully that has come through loud and clear. What next we're going to talk about, as I said, in terms of the things we'll achieve today, is why sort of having a clear networking goal, or a goal for your networking, is important, and how that helps your networking, how that helps your networking ask in terms of connecting to other people. So write down. You can feel free to share it in the chat, but in your piece of paper, journal, whatever you're writing notes in, what is your biggest networking challenge right now? What are you grappling with, around your career, or, what's the struggle? Okay. And let's see if we can give you some answers to try and solve it. What I'd love you to do, if you're writing all this down on a piece of paper, find a part of the paper where you got some space, and space below where you write your networking challenge. And when you've written that down across the top or wherever it is on your page, why don't you put 3 columns underneath of it? Yeah, you're going to do some work here. Okay. So let's tell you why I want you to do this. I look like, in terms of networking, when I think about all this, all right, besides being social creatures, we get things done with the help of other people. If you're going to ask other people for help, you need to know what they're capable of. And to help them figure out if they can help you, need to be kind of clear on what you're looking for and why they are the ones who can help you with that answer. Here's where the neuroscience comes in. 10 million bits of information every second is hitting our conscious brain. It is trying to figure out, right, not only the external world, but how to make the internal world of your body operate. It can only process 50 bits. Anything that is too big, too expansive, too amorphous, your conscious brain is going to say, no, I can't do it. So as an example, if you wrote down that your networking challenge is you want to find a job, and you're frustrated because no one has helped you find one, well, that's part of the problem. When you ask that question of somebody else, their conscious brain is going, hold on. This is too vague. It's going to take effort. I don't have time for that. Your brain, your mind is like, I like to say, it's like Ebenezer Scrooge. It is a miser. So how do you get through that miser? You get specific. So if you're saying, I'm searching for a job, that is your biggest networking challenge right now. I'm needing to find a job. What kind of job? Well, Kelly, I'm in the exploration phase. I'm like, okay, what are you exploring? What I want you to do in that first column, as I said, your networking challenge at the top, 3 columns. In the first column, what are some of these questions? I'm interested in careers in what are you exploring? Let's just keep with that example. I'm interested in a career. I'm exploring new careers. Well, what interests you? Well, space interests me. What else? Entertainment. Okay, what else? Right? and then get more and more specific. Well, space, I'm really thinking like in a museum where I can guide people around, like working in a museum that has a planetarium or what. Okay, that's a heck of a lot different than saying I'm interested in career in space and I want to be an astronaut, or I want a career in space and oh no, Kelly, I'm not talking about like the space up there. I'm talking about like physical space. Like this is what I mean in terms of being specific. Getting very, very, very specific. So the first column, you start writing down what are some of the things, right, that you're really needing answers to, or that you're inquiring, or you think, right, like some other people can help me with this. In the middle column, you start thinking about who is the best person or group to ask or approach about this. Well, Kelly, I need more customers to sell my services to. And I'm in the SaaS business and my ideal, okay. In the middle column, it's like, is there someone else who is got a SaaS business who is selling into a similar customer base? Or is there somebody else who's got a similar customer base who can tell you where those people hang out? Right? One example of this, when I did something for SCORE, a guy stood up, he's a contractor, and he said, I need more customers. I said, who's your ideal customer? And he started to describe his ideal customer. Somebody else in the audience said, I know exactly where you're going to find those people. They all volunteer for this organization, and your skill sets as a contractor could help them. So why don't you give me your card? I'll send you an email and invite you to our next organizing meeting for this not-for-profit, and you're going to meet everyone you need to service your business. So first column's the need. The second column is where you think about who can answer, who can direct me to the answer. The third column, right? We're going to say, like, what's the tactic? What's the best way to reach that person? Go back to my contractor example. This woman said to him, I'll email you, and I'm going to bring you to an organizing meeting for this not-for-profit. She has now just given him the networking gold. Here's how you connect with these people who are your ideal customer. The ideal customer you, the contractor, have identified. He doesn't have to schmooze. He doesn't have to create a bunch of flyers, right? He doesn't have to show up in some other way and say, oh, no, just give me their addresses and I'll go knock on their door. Here's the gold. This is the way you reach the other person. Because part of your aim when networking is to be heard. And that's not our preference. That's the other person's preference. So what's really important, and this is why I sort of do this 3-column exercise, breaking down how I break things down. What do I need? Where's the best place for me to find the answer? Now, how do I approach them in a way that they are going to be receptive to me so I can get my answer? I'll let that just sort of sit in, and I see we got lots of great questions coming in, so I'm excited to get to the Q&A of this session. Let me do the networking quick fixes, and then we'll get to questions, because like I said, I'm looking over here in the right column to the screen, and I'm seeing these all fire in. So thank you everyone for being so active and engaged in this session. 3 networking quick fixes for you. First, audit your network. Go back to think about that slide we started at the beginning where I showed you like all, who am I and all those other networks. Who do you already have in your network? The answers, the people you need, the people who already know your skill set, adore and love you, will do things for you. You may already have them. And instead of running around like a chicken with your head cut off, trying to find new people to believe in you, turn to the people who already do. Also, audit your networking commitments. You may say, well, Kelly, I joined this group and it's not working. Well, how are you showing up? Are you the type of person that other people are going to exert their time, their energy, the resources for? Okay. All of us have three really valuable assets in life, right? You have your reputation, you have your relationships, and you have time. Right? So if someone else, you can earn a couple of those things over again. You can't give back time. So if someone else is going to give up their time for you, you want to make sure that you are having a reputation, right, that they want to do that for. So audit your network, audit your networking activities. Go back and I want to say, assess your engagement. Are there things that you've dropped the ball on? Are there times where you're like, what I'm thinking I'm doing all this networking, but I'm really just spinning my wheels? Go back over your calendar and assess. Am I really putting in the time and the effort? Where are things where I can, and I'm going to get to I got a bonus networking fix for you, but assess what you're doing and make changes. If you can take stuff off your calendar, do it. I'm not asking or suggesting with networking you need to add more onto it. Assess what you've got based on your goals. Assess what you've got based on your engagement. And then the third quick fix is then to activate. Right? One of the things, it is partly on the assess here too. Often when people say to me, hey, Kelly, I should join this networking group, or I should undertake or participate in a networking activity. My response to them is, tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more about the group. Tell me more about the outcomes you've received. Tell me more why you're involved. Because then I need to assess, right? Does the promise of this event, this networking group, does it align with my networking needs and goals? Because it might not, or it may. So that's part of the assess before you activate. And then activate is, where can you step up? Where you've assessed and you've seen you don't have, you haven't been kind of showing up fully, where you haven't been as engaged, where you can get more out of the Chamber of Commerce or whatever it may be. And where do you need to activate new relationships by taking on or participating in one of those you should events? Okay. So those are my three networking quick fixes. Look at what you're doing, audit, assess, and then activate. Here's the bonus fix. This is probably my number one networking pet peeve, and it's the networking pet peeve of a lot of very busy people. I also think it's the biggest networking mistake you can correct. Okay. When someone does something for you, follow through and follow up. What's the follow through? Thanking them for their time. Thanking them for the suggestion. I mean, basic human decency, but guess what? People don't do it. People think, oh, I was in the meeting and I told them thank you. No. Go back and fire them an email. Go back and connect with them on LinkedIn saying, I really appreciate your time and, going to take your recommendations to heart. The follow-up is you let them know what you did with that information. So for example, someone says to you, oh, you're looking for that kind of job? My friend is hiring, here's his or her email, send them your resume, tell them I sent you, good luck, and let me know what happens. Let them know what happens. Even if they don't say, let me know what happens, let them know what happens. When someone makes those kind of introductions, when someone opens doors, when someone mentors you because you're going through, maybe there's a management change at your company and you don't know what to do and they mentor you, thank them for that and then let them know, hey, it's been a few weeks. I just want you to know that the situation hasn't changed, but your sage advice is getting me through this. Even if it's someone you've just met, this follow through and follow up, this is going to take you from kind of, I want to say, out of the 100% of people who are networking, this is going to take you into probably that top 5%. And this single act, no coffee date required, right? No schmoozing at an event required. The follow through and the follow up, this is what changes a relationship from a one-time nice meeting to having a mentor, to having someone that's keeping you top of mind, somebody who is willing to take your calls, your emails to help you in the future. So if you do nothing else from today's program, do this, do this, do this. There we go. The camera's here on StreamYard. Always, I like to have a good giggle. I'm getting my arrows on it. Frederick, do you want to come back and we can get to questions?
Absolutely. I just want to say first off, this has been great. We've got a lot of engagement in the chat, as you've been seeing coming through. So I'm excited to dive into some of these. First off, I've got two kind of similar, one question, one comment that turns into a question. Anonymous asks, are there any suggestions for how to start or continue networking for those who are introverted or suffer from social anxiety? And Renee adds to that kind of that she worries that that she doesn't offer that, she doesn't have anything to offer to other people. How can she engage in networking?
Okay, these are two of my favorite questions. Absolutely two of my favorite. First off, I think in our digital, busy, noisy, 24/7 world, people who are more intentional, considerate, deliberate, and focused in their networking outreach are better network builders. And I have found that, guess what? That often relates to someone being an introvert. Okay? So don't confuse the gift of the gab, right? The extrovert who gets their energy from other people, right? I know lots of extroverts who during 2020 were suffering. They get their energy by being the life of the party, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean they're great network builders. So if you are an introvert, right? I actually think in the world we live in now, you have a superpower. You are acutely aware of other people and their needs. You are more in tune of how you can reach out. So for asking the question, I'm an introvert, all right, I want you to step back and think, okay, again, what is my goal? Who is it that can help me? That clarity on why you're reaching out to people, being in tune to what they need, you're going to make really strong networking asks. Let me give you an example that appears in my book, because actually my book, Build Your Dream Network, is filled with case studies of, it's not just me, hey, Kelly on networking, really great case studies. And most of the people, I did not plan this, most of the people I interviewed, Frederick, are introverts. And one of the great interviews is with a guy by the name of Joe Styler, who's at GoDaddy. Joe has built an incredible network because he is a great manager of other people, because he is a great listener, because he is very considerate. When Joe knew he needed to expand his career because he wanted to move out of a customer service facing role into an aftermarkets role, he's like, I need to learn about a network in the aftermarkets industry. He was very clear on why and how he needed to step out of his comfort zone. So that's the other piece of this, is like, okay, understanding why you're stepping into the room. Does it make all your social anxiety, magically, dissipate? No, but you can say, I know why I'm here. I know why I need to, as Joe told me when I chatted with him, he said to me, yeah, the aftermarkets industry, their big industry conference is in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And as I like to jokingly say, if you're an introvert, that's like a fast track ticket to hell. Like, I can't imagine anything worse as if you were introverted than being told you're going to go to a massive conference in Vegas. And Joe was like, no, as an introvert, I didn't look forward to it, but I knew why I was stepping into that room. And that helped him manage that, social anxiety of working the room. As to the second part of the question, as to what do you have to give? Because this also happens when people are earlier in their career, whatever, and we're all told networking generosity, you got to give before you get. What do you need to give, right? Consideration. What you need to do is be respectful. What you need to understand is someone else is giving their time, valuable asset, their reputation, i.e. their expertise, they're sharing with you, and they may be giving their relationships to you. Be respectful of that. Come to a meeting having done your homework. One of the worst conversations I ever had, Frederick, young woman got on a Zoom with me. And no, since we mentioned Vegas, I don't have a poker face. And she requested the meeting with me, and her first words out of her mouth were, I know I can read about you online, Kelly, but why don't you tell me about your career? Right? No, do your homework. Come to the table with a better question. Respect that, you may be like, okay, can I just meet you for a 15-minute coffee date? Well, maybe the person travels. Maybe they don't, maybe just asking a really good question in an email and you're going to get your answer. And then your networking give is to follow up and thank them for that information. And then your networking give is to follow through and let them know what you did with that. So coming to the table as with that kind of networking generosity, because most people, particularly, I think this question comes up, Frederick, I'm going to assume, someone feeling that they're sort of lower and they're networking with, someone kind of more experienced, the person who's more experienced, right? They don't need the same thing from you. They may, there is a thing called a helper's high that aligns with a runner's high. We get a dopamine hit, adrenaline rush from helping somebody else out. You're giving that to us. But if we say, hey, Frederick, get back to me and let me know how that turned out, do it. There's your networking give. That's what you have to give. Prepare for the meeting, do your homework. The good stalking on the internet, Google the person's name, read everything. We're not posting blogs and on, doing webinars and on podcasts because we've got nothing else to do. We like to give back. So read that information, take it all in, ask a better question. That's your networking give.
No, that all makes sense. To kind of tie in, especially with when you were talking about the introversion and making sure that you have your direction. Shannon asks, how should I balance the fact that I'm open to several different paths while still trying to be specific?
Well, I think this is a great question from Shannon, to be able to say to people, I'm curious, I'm pursuing two different paths, or here's what I'm weighing out. Think about why, kind of what of each is sort of interesting to you, because in the exploration of that, right, you might start eliminating. When I was leaving the practice of law and figuring that I didn't know what I was going to do. I was working for a big firm, and I was like, yeah, this is not working. It's kind of grit in your shoes. This is not right. I don't really hate the practice of law, but I don't know what I want to do. So I went and interviewed at other law firms. Guess what? Not the answer. X, that was off. Went and interviewed in-house. I was like, no, don't want to go in somewhere and be a GC. Okay, so what do I like about what I'm doing? And even then it was like, do I go into marketing? Do I go into recruiting? Do I go into attorney training and development? So then I went through a phase that I was like, let me talk to some people in these roles. Let me talk to some people in these roles. As soon as I talked to someone in recruiting and she described her job, I was like, oh no, I cannot, not my energy. Right. And that's how I narrowed it down. So that if you're in the exploration phase, and I think that's a perfectly great way to reach out to someone and say, I'm really curious about your career and, what you're doing with your degree, and that you've chosen to do this. Would you be up to speaking to me about it? Right. And as you talk to people or listen to podcasts, I did see there was a question about someone wanting to get a career mentor. Right. Listen, think more broadly on these things, alumni interviews, books, podcasts. You can get mentored by someone by the information they're putting out as opposed to just like, hey, I'm going to take you under my arm for the rest of your life. Like, what are the questions you have? And use that as a way to seek out mentors to get advice and guidance that you need. And then use the follow through and follow up, because, best way, I say to get the support that you need to get people thinking about you is to, like, little bits of information, shows who you are, shows that they want to help, versus showing up and saying, hey, can you do this, for me?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And Nikki has two questions, kind of changing gears a little bit. Nikki has two questions here. They are wondering, how do you draw the line between a network connection and a friend, or should there even be a line? And as part of that, is it better to create new social media accounts or LinkedIn accounts or Facebook accounts for networking to keep that private life separate? Or is it okay to merge it somewhat?
You never know. Listen, I think there was an era, when I think of like Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. When that came out, we very much had like the hierarchy, like our view of networking.
Right. Because
of the world we live in now, you don't know where your opportunity is going to come from. When I was the interim CMO of a startup, the founder, the CEO, was like 30 years younger than me. You don't know, right? So could a friend recommend something? One of my friends, the networking linchpin to what he needed was his personal trainer. Now, sometimes, and this is particular for women, women can get a little kind of squirrely about, asking friends, for a networking, like a business or a career ask. But that's a very individual thing. But hey, you never know where your opportunities are. So why, kind of silo these things? There may be people in your network that you're like, what? They don't get what I'm doing. Therefore, these are the conversations I'm going to have with them. Oh, Frederick, you've got a good job. Why are you going to quit it and become an entrepreneur? You know what I'm talking, like the family, right. Someone who's really fearful for you. Okay, you're like, cool. Not worth having those conversations because I'm igniting their fears. And, this is causing me unnecessary anxiety and stress. But I personally wouldn't separate these things. I keep them as one. But again, I would go to when I talked before about networking platforms, I kind of think LinkedIn is where we talk professionally. Mm-hmm. So if family members are calling, with you there and they're like chatting things like, hey, where are you coming for Thanksgiving? I'd be like, yo, we do that in text message. Can you get over to WhatsApp? I don't need that in my business stream, on LinkedIn.
Sure. So there's areas where one thing might happen, but overall it's okay if they connect somewhat.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But I'll also be saying I've been known to block family members because they're so weird on social media.
That's a separate thing.
That's a separate networking conversation.
Right. I think we've all got that going on.
Yeah.
Erica shares, and I'll turn it into a question for her. Biggest challenge for her is reaching out to older contacts to reactivate those, to reconnect with them. She doesn't want to lose the relationships, but how can you do that if that might have been sitting stagnant for a few years?
One of the things I sort of think about is, and I'm sure with this question, this is why I sort of said, how do you show up every day? If you were the great colleague, if you were this, it was a wonderful neighborhood relationship, pen pal, but whatever it may be, there's actually a rush of warm feelings. I want to say grossly underestimate how the other person will feel hearing from us. So reach out, right? Reach out, right? If you were that great colleague, if you were, right? And listen, we all have busy, messy, complicated lives. So don't worry about that lapse of time. There's stuff that's gone on in their lives and they haven't been bombarding you with information like, in your inbox that you've been ignoring, or at least I'm assuming that. So reach out. I mean, you might want to, kind of do the good stalking on the internet, see what's going on with them. But why not saying, you know what? I was on this webinar today and they were talking about networking, and you know what? I kind of thought about you. And it's been like 10 years. And, Kelly asked the question, think of someone in your life who really helped you in your career. And I thought about you. And I just wanted to let you know. I got a lovely, it was a direct message on LinkedIn. It was like the equivalent of a handwritten letter. And it was from a young woman who had, she'd been an attorney at the firm where I had done attorney professional development. And it probably been close to a decade since I had been in that role. And there's probably a 3 to 5 year period I would have known this young woman. And I knew her as this associate. I knew her from being someone who, I gave her, had to talk about her performance review, or, and she might have helped me with PD stuff. I didn't see her every day, but I knew the name and remembered the sort of this very responsible, well-liked, intelligent, high-performing attorney. So it'd been about a decade. So she wrote me, like I said, the equivalent of a handwritten letter, on LinkedIn in the direct message of like, I've been reading your posts. I see what you've been up to. Do you remember me? And I'm like, of course I do, right? Like, you remember decent people. Here's what I've been doing since we worked together. And here's the intersection, Kelly, of where your life is and my life is right now. And then she said, I don't know if you have time, but I would love to ask you some questions about, and it was very specific and focused. And I was like, I am on the phone with you. I like, right. So
right.
That idea of how you approach, like send the email you would want to receive from a long lost, colleague or connection.
No, that's great. Yeah. And it actually kind of relates to me, because literally just before we were getting on this call, my partner, she had sent me over a message and said, hey, I've got this old contact, you should reach out to him. And I'm like, well, you reach out to him too, get this connection. Like, he doesn't know me, but he knows you. And she's like, I don't remember, you won't remember me. But, it's.
You never know.
You never know. And, if you approach that in that certain way, yeah. So to kind of relate to, I want to go back to that mentoring, I think you had answered Martha's question about how, as someone looking for a mentor, how to break out into that and so on. You had talked about even just looking at whatever material they had produced out there. Denise asks it from the other way. So what happens when, you have a lot of experience, when you are, further down your career path, and you're not sure where to begin in becoming a career mentor?
What an interesting question, right? Like, this is where, if there's likely, right? I want to say if you're still working, right, you can just decide you want to do this sort of thing. This could be the sort of thing to reach out to the alumni office, right, of your, the school you graduated from. I'm sure they would love, right? Like, where are there volunteer opportunities? You could say, oh, here's an organization, they want people to do mock job interviews, right? Like, think about, all right, first of all, there are lots of avenues. I might look at it and say, all right, I want to be a career mentor, like around what? Is it women in STEM? Is it, where and how is this? Where can I bring my experience and likely network to bear that will have a bigger impact? Oh, right. Here's where my, I had a long career in pharmaceuticals, and this is what the challenges were for women. You know what? I'm going to go and mentor young professionals through the professional organization of, the profession I just left, and I can mentor them and be access to mentors. So many things around our careers have those, but otherwise, local community centers, local YWCA, the YMCA, like all of those have opportunities. And, alumni, often enough, here we are, alums of all sorts of institutions, and there's so much of a need on those alumni offices. I'm sure they would be just like, please, Help us.
Very much. Oh, yes. Well, fortunately, the hour has gone by very fast. It's been very informative. We've learned a lot, but unfortunately, that means that we are reaching the end, and so we've got to start wrapping things up. But this really has been enjoyable. I know that I've learned a lot. I know that everybody in the comments and have been watching have learned a lot. So I've really appreciated that. I will remind all of our viewers, thank you for joining us today. The book link is down below us in the resources section. So please, if you haven't already checked out that book, order that book, please do so. It's very interesting. But yeah, I thank you so much to all of you, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.